What's up? Today we're gonna be talking about the queen's pawn move, pawn to d4. How do you counter the queen's gambit? After all, those who watch the movie may very well play it against you, don't they? Alright, so after pawn d4, pawn d5, pawn c4, we're reaching one of the most classical chess openings of all, the queen's gambit. And on top level, people usually continue in a classical way, pawn e6. But I've noticed one interesting thing, that on amateur level, the queen's gambit accepted works extremely well, because most of your opponents aren't really well familiar with it and they don't really know what they're doing here, and you can take advantage of that and get a winning position straight out of the opening. And just so that you can understand why this variation is so effective for black, let's try to imagine yourself in the shoes of your opponent. Think about this for a second. How would you play here if you are playing white? It is white to move. How would you play here? In most cases, people play knight to c3 because that's a standard move in the classical. In the queen's gambit declined, here if black goes pawn e6, white usually goes knight c3. Therefore, white just plays by analogy. If you take this pawn, they still play knight c3, although it's kind of wrong in this case. Another move of white, which is also equally popular, is the move pawn e3, where it just wants to grab this pawn back, and many of your opponents are familiar with an opening trap that if black goes b5 and white continues with a4, that leads to this quick win for white. Lots of your opponents are aware of this opening trap and they're hoping for it, so they're playing this move pawn e3. And finally, quite many of your opponents will also play a quite similar move pawn e4 with a similar purpose of taking this pawn back with their bishop, but also to occupy the center. And again, I don't really say that this move is wrong, but if you look at the pros, at the grandmasters, they usually don't play any of those moves. Although, of course, sometimes maybe they do, but in the vast majority of the cases, they do play knight to f3. And we're going to see why in a second. Because against all the other moves of white, all the moves that we mentioned, knight to c3, pawn e3, pawn e4, we're going to use the same response, which is equally effective. Let's start with the most common move, the most popular move, knight to c3. You strike in the center with the move pawn e5. That's what I suggest you to do. You kind of start to counterattack or just to attack right away. You don't really wait for anything. Temporarily, you're a pawn up, you grab the pawn over here on c4, therefore you're willing to give this pawn back, but to have quick development and early attack. With this move pawn e5, you open up this bishop, you open up this quick development, you obviously attack white center. If white ever takes here on e5, that's not an issue. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but basically after that you trade the queens off, forcing white's knight to go back, and that's not a challenge for you at all, so that's not really an issue. And in most cases, according to the database, white goes pawn d5, just trying to somehow maintain the pressure, and that is already quite a wrong move, because then you continue with knight f6, you're still a pawn up, and white also feels a little bit uncomfortable about this pawn on d5 because you're putting pressure on it. Maybe in some variations you're going to play bishop b4, neutralize this knight and pick up this pawn. White feels uncomfortable. They're going to play pawn e4. That's what they do in most cases, supporting their center, still hoping to grab the pawn back. In this case, one of the main things that you got to do is not to play bishop b4. It's a very common error that you got to be aware of. Just don't play this move. Bishop b4 looks very tempting for black to put this pin, and all that, to threaten knight takes e4, and it's all good, but it fails to queen a4 with a double attack. It's check to the king and attack of the bishop. So for that simple reason, that doesn't work. So let's take it back. But instead of bishop b4, we have another move, which is fairly strong. It's the move pawn b5. White was going to take this pawn with their bishop, so he just defended. And although white can take this pawn on b5, and in most cases they will, because if not, they're just a pawn down, they can't develop their bishop normally and over here. So if they take over here, then you take back white's central pawn on e4, which is nice, because we know that center is important. If you can eliminate a pawn's pawn from the center, if you can grab it, good for you. Moreover, after white plays bishop takes c4, you have another unpleasant follow-up, the move bishop b4, which forces white's king to make a move, because look at this, your bishop attacks along this diagonal, and your knight is actually doing a good job controlling these both squares. Therefore, white can't cover their king, they're going to lose material. And white has to move the king away, so they can't castle anymore. This king is going to be a long-term weakness, a long-term problem for white, and you already achieved a great position. Basically, you can just castle, and you're already having a really excellent position. But if you want to completely humiliate your opponent, you've got another shot. Knight takes f2. Oops, not here, over here. Knight takes f2. And from here, obviously you're attacking a whole lot, so in most cases white will capture this, and you've got this follow-up queen h4 check. Check to the king, and the double attack of this bishop. That's the whole point of the combo. Thanks to this little combo, you grab one more pawn, you expose white's king completely. After something like pawn to g3, queen takes c4, you've got just way too much for white to handle. You want a couple pawns, you attack this knight, white's king is weak, maybe you want to play bishop c5 and attack it, you know, this pawn on d5 is weak. I mean, we can continue analyzing this variation, but I've asked my cat, he said that even he would convert this, so I think that we can stop over here. By the way, for those who care, my cat Argun is doing very well, better than most of the people that I know. It's just that I'm in the new studio, so I don't show him here, but he's doing perfectly fine. Sometimes I feel envy to him. All right, let's explore one more option. So here if white plays the Queen's Gambit against you. By the way, if you aren't very familiar with the Queen's Gambit, I would recommend my other video about that. I'll link it above and below the video, where it's a quick crash course of the Queen's Gambit, all the main ideas that you gotta know. You may check it out later. For now, let's dive into the Queen's Gambit accepted, pawn takes. And here we have analyzed knight to c3. Against that, we're striking in the center with the move pawn e5. And as we already know, we're going to play this move pawn e5 against virtually any other move of white just as well. And by the way, that's why pros play knight f3. They want to prevent this move from happening. They don't want to let black this option of pushing pawn forward to e5. But amateurs are unaware of that, so they don't know this. They just play more natural moves, something like pawn e4. In this case, we're still playing our move, pawn e5, striking in the center. Pawn e5, now we attack the center. As always, if white decides to accept your pawn, you're quite happy, and you trade queens, forcing white's king to move, and the material balance is equal, you're doing well. Pawn d5 seems a more principled move for white, but then you still play knight f6, threatening this pawn, and you can see that it actually transposes into the same position, the exact same position. Now, after knight to c3, we play pawn b5, we already know that. Now, in the previous example, we have analyzed that if white takes over here, you recapture over here, you're doing well. What if white does not take there? In that case, they usually play bishop g5, the move loved by most of the amateurs. As soon as they can create the spin, they're usually happy. But we're going to ignore that and play the move bishop c5, putting your bishop to an active position. And at this point, white will probably take this pawn anyway, because if not, you know, they're down material and they can't bring their bishop out. It feels annoying, so they'll probably take it over here anyway. But we've prepared another beautiful refutation, this time with the move bishop takes f2. Still, although it's a completely different position, but we're still exploding on this f2 square using another tactical motif. After king takes, there's knight takes c4, check to the king and double attack off the bishop. So after king goes somewhere, we happily grab the bishop, and now we are up material, and you know, white's king made moves, it can't castle anymore, it's exposed, and again, you have a completely winning position over here already. By the way, let me still address one of the questions that you probably have. After white plays something, let's say knight c3, you attack in the center with the move pawn e5, we're usually analyzing white pushing the pawn forward. But what if your opponent sees that this pawn is undefended and simply captures it? What's going to happen over here? Let's dive into it for a second, so just that you have no doubts about this. Well, in this case, you will happily trade queens, so that white can't attack you anymore, really. Now white has to either move the king, which is not really that nice for white, or move their knight back, which is also nice for you. Then you go knight to c6. The material balance is currently equal, but you're actually having the initiative. You are, you know, dictating what's happening here. You are attacking white, and white has to react. That's nice. So far, you're just attacking this pawn over here. Therefore, while I'll play knight f3. And now you can also develop your bishop with a tempo, bishop b4, check to the king. Again, white has to react, something like bishop d2. Now you trade, forcing another, you know, unfavorable move of white, either to move their knight back and to lose this pawn, or to expose their king. King goes to d2. And now you just develop, let's say, knight e7, and you have a lot. You know, from here, the knight is ready to go knight g6 and win this pawn. So that's one thing. You can develop your bishop somehow, maybe to e6 or to g4, castle queenside, attack along the d-file, also nice. Let me just show you some variation, which is not, of course, completely forced. I don't expect you to remember, you don't need to. It's just to show you different ideas that black can exploit in this variation. Let's say after pawn e4, white tries to develop and attack this pawn, you play bishop g4 to attack white as well. So white takes this pawn. And now you want to also grab something, therefore you first eliminate the defender, this knight, you eliminate it, and after that, you take over here with a double attack to the bishop and the pawn. The only way for white to maintain both weaknesses is to play a bishop back to e2. Now you can castle queenside, simultaneously delivering check to the king. And if the king goes here, trying to hide behind this pawn wall, then you just play an interesting move, rook to e8, just centralizing the rook. And if white plays something like rook g1 or whatever, you actually have a very funny combo. Knight f5, check to the king, and if the knight is accepted, you play another beautiful move, knight to g6, delivering a checkmate. It's a rare case when a move knight back to g6 would deliver a checkmate, but it is the case. So from here, we're controlling everything around white's king, and this is a checkmate. Again, this is not a forced variation. It just goes to show how you have like really a lot of ideas here how to attack great problems for white, and it is actually white who has to be careful and fight for equality. Alright, here are a couple other things to be aware of. Another move that your opponents will often use against you is the move pawn a3. As I've shown you previously, they're hoping for you to go for b5 and go down the line of this trap where white wins your rook, you know, somewhere along that diagonal. We aren't going there. We know that we always, as long as we can, we play that move pawn e5, and we're doing completely fine. In this case, white's setter is more secure, but there is nothing special here. If white takes over here on c4, you just trade on d4, and we just have a very normal standard game of chess. You simply develop in the most natural way possible, something like bishop d6. If white develops, you know, you develop, they castle, you castle, they go knight c3, you go knight c6. It's a pretty simple stuff, you know. There's not that much to analyze here. Your bishop will probably be developed over that direction and pin white's knight. So again, it's just a normal game of chess, but the advantage of this variation is that it's very simple. You don't have to memorize much, you just develop normally and you end up with a good position. Okay, so far we analyzed all the casual moves played by amateurs, but what if your opponent is a pro? Well, then you're in trouble. Alright, let me try again. If your opponent is a pro and plays knight to f3, then, you know, I can't really show you all of the variations here because, you know, there's really lengthy theory over here, but I can give you a hint of how you can really confuse your opponent. One variation which works extremely well for blitz is the line pawn to c6, where you really aim to just defend this pawn, and pawn c6 serves that purpose. In some variations, it gives you the option of playing pawn b5, but there's also another hidden idea. After white plays pawn a3 over here, you know, trying to get the pawn back, you just play a strange looking move bishop b6, just defending the pawn. And white may be annoyed by that they can't just get this pawn back, and if they don't do this urgently, then, you know, at some point you're going to play pawn b5 and just fix it there. And lots of your opponents, including strong ones, will play the move knight to g5. Looks very advantageous, you know, kicking this bishop away, after that getting the pawn back, looks great for white, but there is a refutation, queen a5, double attack to the king and knight, and you're just winning a piece and the game. So that's how you're going to win a lot of games. And if white does not play that well, then you just develop. I mean, you play knight f6, pawn g6, if you encounter your bishop at some point, if you need to defend this pawn, you play pawn b5, and you develop that way, and you still have a very nice position. And even if you aren't very familiar with this variation, guess what? Your opponents don't know anything about it at all. Therefore, at the very least, you're going to have an equal chances, but probably even better, because after watching this video, definitely you're much better prepared than the vast majority of your opponents. Besides the final variation, knight g5, queen a5, where black wins, there are a couple other really popular traps. You may click link over there and check them out right now. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you may do that right now by clicking over there and hitting the bell so that you don't miss out on the next uploads. Hope you enjoyed this one. Take care. Talk soon.